Odysseus in the Odyssey is both the idealised hero and the deeply human figure whose journey mirrors the internal journeys we all take. His story isn't just about getting home, it's about becoming someone who understands the cost of the path he's walked. That's why he endures, not because he's perfect, but because he's recognisably conflicted, ambitious, loving, prideful, and endlessly adaptable. He was the prototype for the modern protagonist long before the modern world and its artistic projects existed. So in this video, I'm going to be talking about the main character of Homer's epic poem, how he relates to Christopher Nolan's other protagonists, and whether he could end up being one of the very best main characters in the director's filmography. Before I get into it though, if you want to see more updates and videos on the work of Christopher Nolan and his upcoming epic, then don't forget to support this upload by giving it a like rating and subscribing to the channel. But without further ado, let's dive into the character of Odysseus in the Odyssey. So Odysseus in the Odyssey is one of those characters who feels larger than life, yet unmistakably human, and that tension is exactly what makes him thematically rich. He stands at the crossroads between heroic tradition and the emerging idea of a more psychologically complex protagonist. On one level, he embodies the classic Greek virtues with courage, cunning, endurance, and an almost supernatural ability to survive. But on a deeper thematic level, he represents the struggle to reconcile identity with experience. Every island he lands on tests a different part of him, whether that be his loyalty, his pride, his self-control, or his longing for home. And the poem uses his journey to explore what it actually means to be a hero, when heroism isn't just about strength, but about navigating moral ambiguity, temptation, and the consequences of one's own choices. What Odysseus really symbolises is the human desire to return to a place, to a version of oneself, and to a life that feels whole. His voyage becomes a metaphor for the long, uneven path towards self-understanding. He's constantly forced to adapt, to disguise himself, to negotiate between who he is and who he needs to be in order to survive. That theme of shifting identity is central, with Odysseus being the man of many turns, and the poem treats adaptability not as a flaw, but as a defining human trait. At the same time though, his intelligence is double-edged. His cleverness wins wars, but it also creates suffering, most famously when he taunts the Cyclops Polyphemus, an act of pride that brings divine punishment on his entire crew. The Odyssey doesn't let him off the hook for that, as it frames heroism as something messy and something that can cause harm even when it comes from admirable qualities. And yes, he's absolutely a complex character. Not in the modern psychological sense where we get the interior monologues and trauma arcs, but in the way his actions reveal contradictions. He's loyal to Penelope, yet repeatedly unfaithful. He's a brilliant strategist who sometimes acts impulsively. He's compassionate in moments and ruthless in others. He's a king who longs for home, but also a wanderer who seems strangely drawn to the thrill of the unknown. These contradictions aren't treated as inconsistencies, as they are the very point of the Odyssey. Odysseus is a demonstration of impulses, virtues, and flaws, and the poem uses him to explore the idea that identity is not fixed, but constantly negotiated. Coming now to Christopher Nolan's protagonists, I think they stand out because they're built around internal conflict rather than external spectacle. Even in his biggest, loudest films, the emotional engine is always a character wrestling with identity, guilt, memory, or moral responsibility. Nolan doesn't write heroes who simply do things, because he writes heroes who are defined by what they can't let go of. Think of Cobb in Inception, a man whose brilliance is inseparable from his grief. His entire arc is a battle between the architect of dreams and the prisoner of his own subconscious. Or even Bruce Wayne in the Dark Knight trilogy, who isn't just a vigilante but a man trying to reconcile trauma, duty, and the burden of being a symbol like Batman. Or even someone like Cooper in Interstellar, who's a pilot, a father, a dreamer, and is also driven by a longing for his daughter that it bends the structure of the film around it. Essentially, Nolan's protagonists are compelling because they're mythic figures built on deeply human fractures. Their internal dilemmas shape the narrative as much as any plot twist or set piece. What I think makes all of these characters resonate is Nolan's commitment to thematic unity. His protagonists embody the central ideas that his films explore. Leonard Shelby in Memento is literally defined by the fragility of memory. Oppenheimer is consumed by the paradox of creation and destruction. The protagonist in Tenet is a man learning to trust a future he can't see. So while Nolan uses his leads as thematic vessels, he never lets them become hollow symbols within all that. They're flawed, obsessive, sometimes morally compromised, and that complexity gives his films more emotional weight. They're not just navigating external threats, they're essentially navigating themselves. And Nolan's signature non-linear storytelling amplifies that complexity, letting us experience their inner turmoil as fractured timelines, looping narratives, or shifting perspectives. His protagonists feel like Odyssean figures for the modern age, defined by intellect, haunted by past choices, and constantly forced to confront the cost of their own agency. That connection becomes even clearer when you place Odysseus alongside his characters and the heroes who came before him. Odysseus is one of the earliest examples of a protagonist whose complexity drives the story rather than just his physical feats. He's cunning, flawed, prideful, loving, deceptive, and endlessly adaptable. He succeeds in moments through intelligence over just brute force, and his journey is as much about self-discovery as it is about survival. In many ways, he fits the kind of protagonist that Nolan gravitates toward, someone defined by internal contradictions and someone whose strengths are inseparable from their weaknesses. But while Odysseus' cleverness saves him, it also damns him. His longing for home is noble, but his detours reveal a man who is tempted by adventure, ego, and also desire. He's a hero who must constantly negotiate who he is, and that negotiation becomes the thematic spine of the Odyssey as a whole. Now, compared to earlier mythic heroes, whether it be Achilles, Gilgamesh, or Beowulf, Odysseus is far more psychologically layered. Achilles is defined by rage, Gilgamesh by kingship and mortality, and Beowulf by strength and honor. Odysseus, by contrast to these, is defined by multiplicity. Like I said, he's the man of many turns, a shapeshifter of identity, and a strategist who survives by reading situations and adapting. That complexity makes him feel startlingly modern, and it's why he aligns so naturally with Nolan's other protagonists. So both Odysseus and Nolan's leads are characters whose internal struggles shape the narrative around them. They're haunted by their pasts, are driven by obsessions, and forced to confront the consequences of their own brilliance. Odysseus' long journey home becomes a metaphor for the winding path towards self-understanding, just as, say, Cobb's descent into dreams becomes a metaphor for grief, or Oppenheimer's creation becomes a metaphor for the burden of knowledge. Odysseus is the somewhat prototype for the modern complex protagonist, a figure whose contradictions make him timeless. And Nolan's characters feel like his cinematic descendants, being mythic yet human, brilliant yet flawed, and defined not by perfection but by the internal battles they can never fully escape. That lineage from ancient epic to contemporary cinema reveals something powerful about storytelling itself, in that we return to characters like Odysseus and Nolan's protagonists because they reflect the truth that heroism isn't clean or simple. It is messy, conflicted, and deeply human. So coming now to the Odyssey movie, can Matt Damon's Odysseus become one of the very best of Nolan's main characters? Well, as touched on, I think Odysseus has the potential to become one of Christopher Nolan's greatest protagonists because the character is already built on the exact psychological architecture Nolan gravitates toward. There's all the obsession, identity, guilt, and the cost of brilliance. Odysseus isn't just a warrior, he's a man defined by his mind, by the burden of his choices, and by the emotional gravity of home. That's the same DNA that powers Nolan's most compelling leads. What makes this pairing so potent is that Odysseus is already a Nolan protagonist waiting for a Nolan film. He's a figure whose internal contradictions shape the world around him, whose intellect is both his salvation and his downfall, and whose journey is as much about confronting himself as it is about confronting monsters or gods. Damon, with his grounded intensity and ability to play men who are both capable and quietly tormented, could channel that complexity in a way that feels unmistakably Nolan. Odysseus' cunning saves his men, but his pride invites Poseidon's wrath and condemns his crew to years of suffering. That's pure Nolan territory in a protagonist whose greatest strength is inseparable from his greatest flaw. Damon has played characters like this before with Will Hunting, Mark Watney, and Jason Bourne, men who are brilliant, resourceful, and deeply human. So under Nolan's direction, that combination could turn Odysseus into a towering mythic figure with emotional depth rather than just a classical hero. Another reason Odysseus aligns so naturally with Nolan's style is the theme of identity. Throughout the Odyssey, Odysseus is forced to become someone else, literally and metaphorically. He eventually disguises himself as a beggar, lies about his name, reinvents his story, and constantly adapts to survive. And as I mentioned before with Nolan's previous films, he thrives on protagonists whose sense of self is unstable or fragmented. Furthermore, Damon as an actor excels at playing characters who carry that quiet internal conflict, the sense of a man trying to hold on to himself while the world or story pulls him apart. And finally, there's the emotional core in Odysseus' longing for home. Everything he does, every lie, every battle, and every moment of restraint or temptation is driven by the desire to return to Ithaca and Penelope. That emotional through line is what Nolan uses to anchor his most ambitious narratives. Cooper in Interstellar crosses galaxies for his children, Cobb risks madness to get back to his kids, and even Oppenheimer is haunted by the idea of protecting the world he helped endanger. Odysseus' yearning for home is one of the oldest and most powerful emotional arcs in literature, and I think Nolan would treat it not as sentimentality, but as a gravitational force. And Damon's ability to play characters who are emotionally grounded, men who feel deeply without melodrama, could give that longing a raw human weight. But they were my thoughts on whether Matt Damon's Odysseus can live up to the heights of previous Nolan protagonists. Odysseus already embodies the traits that make Nolan protagonists unforgettable, whether that be the brilliance that cuts both ways, the fractured identity, the moral ambiguity, or the emotional anchor that shapes every decision. Under Nolan's direction, I think Odysseus wouldn't just be a hero from antiquity, he'd be a man wrestling with similar internal storms that define the director's greatest characters. Damon's performance could elevate that complexity, turning Odysseus into a figure who feels both mythic and painfully human, a timeless protagonist reimagined through the lens of one of cinema's most introspective storytellers. But if you've read The Odyssey or have seen many of Nolan's films, do you think Odysseus can reach the level of the filmmaker's other main characters, and do you think Damon is going to give us an all-time performance? Let me know down below in the comment section. For much more videos and news on Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey film, then subscribe to the channel and turn on your notifications. Also, if you enjoyed this video, remember to leave a like rating and follow me on social media via the links in the description. But anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed it. I've been Cortex, and as always, make some noise.